First, I want to introduce our panelists. I'm Susan Spilka from the Workplace Equity Project.
Jerry Wachter from the Workplace Equity Project.
Susan King from Rockefeller University Press.
Wendy Newsham from Marianne Liebert.
Matt Giampala from Elsevier.
And
Simone.
okay.
She always sounds like
So everyone who hasn't, please sign in if you can. And let these other people come in.
Can everybody hear us? The microphone picking you up?
Yeah, can you hear me fine? I have a loud voice. And Simone, you can do it from there. Okay, so welcome everyone. You are here for the big reveal of the results of the Workplace Equity Project survey, which was conducted earlier this year. As I said, we have a lot of material to get through, so we're going to try and go fast, and we'll make the slides available to you. Before we start, I want to thank the many individuals and who served as reviewers and advisors, and the organizations, foremost among them SSP, and a handful of other organizations that helped us spread the word about the survey and reach far and wide with it. We had nearly 1,200 people participate in the survey, 1,184. Of those, it was a very long survey, 63 questions. We had about between 830 and 860 who completed all of the questions, including the demographic sections. So we have the most participants in that we know of a survey of the colleagues in our industry to date. So we're going to take Simone, an initial look at the treasure trove of data and comments that we collected. It's going to take some time to unpack it all, and at the end of our presentation, I'll summarize some of the key takeaways, and Simone will share what we're planning as next steps. But before I dive in, I want to touch on a key point. The survey was self-selecting. We included the data that's included is only from those individuals who agreed to participate, and they were targeted through our own networks, social media, and with the help of the supporting industry organizations and individuals. So it's important to review the experiences and the data that you see today in that context, that it's self-selecting. We understand that the demographic breakdown is not necessarily statistically representative of our industry as a whole. We are fortunate in that the SSP and a host of other organizations are in the process of putting together a survey of the organizations in our industry. So next winter, we'll be able to benchmark our data against that data and really get a very accurate picture from both sides. So we'll start with a profile of the respondents. So more women than men responded to the survey. More women than men, than we estimate the gender composition of our industry. We had 21% women, no, 21% male, 76% female, 1% non-binary, and then 3% preferred not to answer. We think the closer breakout of male versus female is 65-35, 60-40, something like that. We'll address this later in our presentation, but it's something to keep in mind. We had about 1,500 free-form comments. Here are a few about gender. We'll be sharing them throughout our presentation, and it's going to be hard to read them all now, but you can get the slides and read them. They are unbelievable. They're so interesting and very consistent as was most of the data. So the next slide, you'll see the sexual identity breakdown. Interestingly, more males and older respondents identified as gay and lesbian, whereas more younger respondents identified as bisexual. There was a higher percentage of Black and Asian respondents among those who preferred not to identify their sexuality. So we had, I think that the numbers are probably in line with at least what I know of the population of the U.S. to be, but this was a global survey, so. Anyway, next slide. If you work in this industry and look around this room, these ethnicity results won't surprise you. The good news is that our younger colleagues identify as more of our younger colleagues identify as people of color. You can also see how people who selected other identified and described themselves. So that was very interesting. I'll give you a moment to glance at these comments on ethnicity. And then, moving on to the age, there's a good spread of participants at different age groups. Though there's fewer over 50, the comment I've included in this is very representative of a lot that voice a similar sentiment, and we'll get to that later. So comparing regions, the pink on the left is regions of birth. The pink on the right is regions of current residence. So it's clear that residents have migrated to publishing centers in North America, Northern Europe, and Australia. Western Europe appears to be the source of some of these migrants, as well as other parts of the world. We asked our respondents about their native languages. English is, overwhelmingly the lead. Other predominant languages were Hindi, came in second, German, Spanish, French, Chinese, you can see. I love the incredible diversity of other languages. I think it's incredible. Just some interesting facts that the 36 to 50-year-old group had the highest percentage of non-native English speakers, which was 18%. The most Hindi speakers fall into the 20 to 35 group, and German speakers are most prevalent in the 51 to 65-year-old group than in any other age category. Okay. This is my favorite finding, particularly. We have a lot of independent thinkers in our industry. I love the other descriptions. They are just priceless. Yes, smash the patriarchy. And I've left some out, but they are just wonderful. Yeah, I was thinking. Well, anyway, so no religion, 53%, and then Christianity. You can see the breakout. You can see the predominant groups. So the younger groups, 20 to 35, selected no religion and Hinduism more frequently than the other groups, other age groups, and Christian and Jewish less frequently. Conversely, the 51 to 65 group had the highest numbers of Christians and Jews and the fewest Hindus and no religion. The Asian category and Black category chose no religion the least frequently. So they were the ones more likely to choose a religion. And this is sort of more subtle, but proportions of respondents who identified as Christians, Jews, or Sikh increase with increasing salary levels, in contrast to Hindus, who mostly fall in the lower salary categories. So, not surprisingly, we are a very educated bunch. You'll see that only 3% don't have university degrees or higher. Some findings that may be of interest. The percent of PhD and postdocs is highest in the oldest group and declines with each younger group. The reverse is true for those with bachelor's degrees through age 65. 66 and over have a higher percentage. A higher percentage of people of mixed multiple ethnicity have PhDs than any other ethnic group. Colleagues with master's degrees are significantly more represented in business development and executive leadership, which makes sense. Those are our MBAs, probably. All qualifications levels of education are represented in the highest salary band, however. And PhDs are more strongly represented in the 100,000 to 150,000 range, but also in the temporary contract roles. And in our survey results, we do have the dollar amounts in dollars, euros, and British pounds. But for the sake of brevity here, we're just using dollars. Okay. So next one. We are a group that comes late to parenting. The 36 to 50-year-old group is the most likely to be caregivers, followed by the 51 to 65-year-old group. And I think that group probably... Oh, I am?
Yeah, this one's this.
Oh, caregiver.
Yeah, no, I was on the disability.
Oh, you were, oh, I'm sorry. Go back to the disability, I'm sorry, I skipped it. Okay. Only about 11% of respondents report physical or mental challenges. The most frequent disability is the mental health category, about 4%, and those are most prevalent in the youngest age group, the 20 to 35. Okay. Okay, now back to caregivers. Again, we come late to parenting. The 36 to 50-year-old group are the most likely to be caregivers, followed by the 51 to 65-year-old group. The 20 to 35-year-old group, only 12% identify as primary caregivers and 7% as shared caregivers. More men than women, 25% of men versus 14% of women report sharing equal responsibility as caregivers, whereas more women respond that they are the primary caregivers, and I kind of love that top comment, which says I have a husband, but I'm still the primary caregiver. The proportions of caregivers respondents increase with increasing salaries in the lower salary bands and stays relatively even after that, which makes sense in terms of career and life progression. Nearly 48% of the Asians and those of mixed and multiple ethnicities say they are primary caregivers or share equal responsibility. Lower percentages of whites and blacks identifying caregiving roles. So the next slide, I've consolidated the employer and employee information, and I've highlighted predominant categories. Two facts I want to call out. We had a very big response from AUP, the Association of University Presses, which after SSP was the second most heavy driver of respondents, SSP being the greatest. So we had a very big showing from small to moderate-sized publishers in our findings, and you can see that there. Also, in terms of the years in job versus years in industry, you can see that there's been a lot of churn in the job market over the past 5 years. No surprise to a lot of people. We'll talk more about salary information later in the presentation. So now I am going to turn over to Jerry, who's going to talk about work-life balance. And we'll do questions at the end.